Tonight on NewsWatch, the search for Flight 370. New questions tonight on files missing from the pilot's flight simulator.
Plus, tensions in Crimea are growing. More on a deadly turn the situation took and how the world is responding to Russia.
And abortion isn't the only choice. Hear why pro-life advocates are calling 2014 the year of adoption. All this and much more tonight on NewsWatch. Malaysia is reaching out to the FBI in the case of the missing Flight 370. Good evening, I'm Wendy Griffith.
And I'm Mark Martin. An American official says the Malaysian government wants help locating and analyzing files. The files are the ones that have been deleted from the home flight simulator of the missing plane's pilot. Meanwhile, the search continues for any sign of the flight. Charlene Aaron has the story.
Investigators are zeroing in on an area the size of Texas in the South Indian Ocean, where satellite data suggests the plane could have gone.
You're on your way to Antarctica at that point. The good news here is that we have the Australians with the NTSB now in charge of this investigation.
And new clues today. Thailand's military reports that its radar detected a plane that may have been Flight 370 just minutes after the jetliner's communications went down. Thai officials say they didn't share the information earlier because no one asked for it. Meanwhile, the search for answers is ongoing. If the plane was in trouble, officials say it didn't send any signal.
There were a number of distress beacons on board the aircraft, and we know that they have not been activated because we are the receiving authority for such alert.
The investigation into why Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 vanished has taken another strange turn. Investigators can't rule out catastrophic system failure, but say all signs point to a deliberate act. Theories abound as to the fate of the 777 jetliner and its passengers, including some pilots speculating on the internet. One suggests an electrical fire erupted in the cockpit and that the aircraft's abrupt turn westward is a clue that the pilot was trying to land at the nearest airport. Another pilot with 25 years experience says all facts point to a terrorist hijacking. He says the plane could be on the ground somewhere, being loaded with bombs or even chemical weapons to carry out a future attack. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
For more, we turn now to our terrorism analyst, Eric Stakelbeck. Eric, it's probably fairly common for pilots to have at-home flight simulators, but the fact that all these files have been erased, is that raising more concerns over the pilot in this case?
Wendy, I think it is. And as you said, the flight simulator, look, this guy's an aviation buff. According to his friends, he's a flight geek is how he was described. So he's at home, he's practicing on the simulator. I guess the question, Wendy, is what was he practicing on the simulator? Whoever hijacked or took this plane, it looks like it was foul play, obviously, knew what they were doing. They knew how to evade radar. They knew how to fly at different altitudes. They made a U-turn in mid-flight. So a lot of things going on there. Why would he erase files from that simulator is the million-dollar question right now. And if you're looking at the pilots, Wendy, because something happened in that cockpit, either it was hijackers or the pilots, and if you're looking at the two pilots, it would seem that the lead pilot, Mr. Shah, who had the simulator in his home, is kind of the more interesting suspect right now in terms of he had the simulator in his home. He was apparently a political fanatic, according to a lot of people who knew him. So a lot of question marks right now surrounding him.
Eric, as we just reported, some experts think that all the signs point to a terrorist hijacking. What do you think?
Yeah, well, Wendy, that's absolutely a possibility. Look, I mean, there's a lot of possibilities, a lot of scenarios still on the board here for what exactly happened to this flight. Hijacking is definitely one. As we've talked about here on CBN News, Wendy, in Malaysia, where this flight originated, there have been Al-Qaeda. There's been an Al-Qaeda presence in that country. In 2000, we had an Al-Qaeda summit in Kuala Lumpur, which is the Malaysian capital. The 9/11 hijackers, a few of them, Wendy, passed through that country. Also, we have the Uyghurs. Funny name, dangerous guys, based in Western China. This plane was bound for China. The Uyghurs want to break away from that country, form their own Islamic State. Lots of possibilities here, Wendy, if it was terror and hijacking.
Well, if the plane was taken by terrorists, Eric, how could they be planning on using it?
That is a scary, scary proposition, Wendy, because a lot of people I'm talking here in D.C. say, look, if this plane landed in an undisclosed location, is there a plan to use it again later? Could it be filled with, God forbid, a weapon of mass destruction flown into a building someplace? Could it be filled with just conventional explosives, again, flown into a building or a target? And the Israelis, Wendy, very interesting wrinkle here, the Israelis have increased their air defense in recent days because of this threat, because of this possibility. And hey, we don't know, Wendy. This is all speculation. This plane might have gone down, unfortunately, in the Indian Ocean someplace. We don't know, but all possibilities right now and all scenarios are on the table, and countries are taking precautions without a doubt.
All right, very interesting. Eric Stakelbeck, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Wendy.
And for more from Eric, make sure you check out his blog and weekly show called The Watchman. And you can find both on our website, that's cbnnews.com.
Turning now to the crisis in Crimea. Pro-Russian forces seized the headquarters of the Ukrainian Navy today, raising the Russian flag over the building. It's just the latest in the growing crisis between Russia and Ukraine. George Thomas reports.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin's bold military moves have left much of the world reeling and on edge.
The crisis in Ukraine is the most serious test of European security in the 21st century so far.
Nearly 3 weeks after marching his troops across the Black Sea Peninsula, a proud Putin declared to thousands of cheering Muscovites in Red Square that Crimea was finally back on the Russian map.
У нас сегодня очень радостный, светлый праздничный день.
In neighboring Ukraine, unease and despair are setting in as the political crisis takes its toll. Months after tens of thousands of Ukrainians took to the streets of Kiev, there is still an air of uncertainty that lingers over this nation.
Business is worsening.
And a weak government here can only watch as Russia continues to deploy more troops along its border. This morning, armed gunmen stormed the Ukrainian naval base in Crimea, raising the Russian flag. It came a day after an Ukrainian officer was killed by Russian forces. The Baptist Christian who leads Ukraine's interim government says Putin's actions are a threat to the world.
I would like to remind you of the history. World War II started with the annexation of the territory of other countries by fascist Germany. Today, the president of Russia, Mr. Putin, who likes to talk about fascism a lot, is copying the fascists of the last century.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry warned Putin that he was, quote, on the wrong side of history, while Vice President Joe Biden, traveling in Poland, said America will consider sending additional troops to the region to reassure Eastern European allies,
including rotating U.S. forces to the Baltic region to conduct ground and naval exercise, as well as training missions.
But will this and increased U.S. and European sanctions be enough to stop an advancing Putin? Probably not. For now, leaders in Kiev and Western capitals can only watch and worry about how far Mr. Putin will go. George Thomas, CBN News.
And this afternoon, Ukraine announced plans to hold joint military exercises with the United States and Britain. The government is also planning to pull all troops out of Crimea.
Israeli airstrikes against Syrian military posts have left 1 Syrian soldier dead and 7 wounded. Today's attack in the Golan Heights is the most serious the two countries have seen since the beginning of the Syrian civil war 3 years ago. It came in response to a roadside bombing that wounded 4 Israeli soldiers. It's still unclear who exactly was behind that bombing, but the Israeli defense minister says Israel holds the Syrian government responsible, saying the Assad regime collaborates with terrorists to hurt Israel and that it has to pay a price. The Syrian army is warning Israel against repeating what they called a hostile act. And the Obama administration has shut down the Syrian embassy in Washington and ordered all non-U.S. personnel to leave the country.
In consideration of the atrocities the Assad regime has committed against the Syrian people, we have determined it is unacceptable for individuals appointed by that regime to conduct diplomatic or consular operations here in the United States.
The Syrian government recently announced it will no longer provide services for Syrians in the U.S. Operations at Syrian consulates across the country also have been suspended.
New revelations about NSA spying. The Washington Post reports the spy agency has been recording every phone call in one foreign country and listening to the conversations 1 month later. The paper did not identify the country at the request of government officials. The program is the latest to come to light after leaks by former NSA employee Edward Snowden.
Janet Yellen says the economy is improving. The new head of the Federal Reserve wrapped up her first two-day policy-making meeting this afternoon. The Fed says it plans to make more cuts to the bond-buying stimulus program that's been in place since the Great Recession.
These sizable and still increasing holdings will continue to put downward pressure on longer-term interest rates, support mortgage markets, and make financial conditions more accommodative, helping to support job creation and a return of inflation to the committee's objective.
The Fed will keep working to keep interest rates low for the time being. It had promised to keep rates near zero until the country's unemployment hit 6.5%, but now says unemployment numbers will not be the only indicator in keeping the rates low.
Coming up, elections in Hungary. A look at the growing threat of the third largest political party there.
Anti-Semitism is so bad in Hungary, half of all Jews there have thought about fleeing.
Yeah, it's being made worse as an anti-Semitic political party is growing more powerful, and that has observers concerned about upcoming elections there.
Yeah, Dale Hurd reports from Budapest.
A memorial to the Jews of Budapest, who were rounded up during World War II and told to take off their shoes before being shot and pushed into the Danube. Hungary's Jews are fearful again because of a return of anti-Semitism. This is the kind of political ad that tapped straight into the Hungarian psyche.
Bankoknak mindent szabad. Míg dolgozunk, ezek csak lopnak. Politikus bűnözőknek mindent szabad.
It's an ad for Jobbik, now the third largest party in Hungary, and some say a possible long shot to rule Hungary in a coalition government someday. A Jobbik member of parliament has called for a list to be drawn up of all the Jews in government because he deems them a security threat.
It's clear that Jobbik's basic principles are very similar to the Nazis, especially considering the so-called Jewish problem. And I need to stress that there is a part of the Hungarian society that has a secret sympathy for Jobbik.
Jobbik started a militia, the Magyar Garda, but it was outlawed. Jobbik claims it was a service organization, but it looked like Aerocross, a Nazi-era party that killed thousands of Jews. It's an open question as to whether Hungarian society is getting healthier or getting sicker.
Sadly, I have to say sicker because of growing intolerance, because of growing poverty.
We asked one of Hungary's leading political consultants, Viktor Szigetvári, if Jobbik could end up in a governing coalition someday, as some predict, or if they're too radioactive for other parties.
They are radioactive, but it is possible that we might have a minority government created after the 2014 general elections. And in this context, it will be interesting what role Jobbik will play.
Jobbik turned down our request for an interview, telling us, "We do not want to help you on the issue of anti-Semitism. Jobbik is dealing with much more important problems right now. The sellout of soil to foreigners and to oligarchs close to the government, the corruption scandals, the chaos in education, and the catastrophic state of public safety." Jobbik repeatedly denies that it is anti-Semitic. On its English language website, it seems to disavow some of the very positions its leaders have spouted publicly. Jobbik says it does not deny the Holocaust, but it also does not like Israel. Steiner and others told us Jobbik should be considered very dangerous, and even if they never rule Hungary, critics say they're a legally elected party, spreading dangerous ideas. But Jobbik seems to be only a symptom in a nation that is still clinging to old-fashioned anti-Semitism. Dale Hurd, CBN News, Budapest.
For more on how Christians in Hungary are taking a stand against Jobbik, visit Dale's blog, Heard on the Web, and you can find it at our website, cbnnews.com.
And up next, choosing life and adoption, how one woman's decision created a passion in the daughter she gave up.
Every year, about 1 million couples in America are seeking to adopt a child. And every year, about 1 million women in America abort their unborn babies.
If those babies could be adopted rather than aborted, it would both end abortion and solve the adoption crisis. In tonight's Focus Report, Paul Strand introduces us to a woman whose life shows adoption is a beautiful thing.
At January's March for Life, the call went out to declare 2014 the year of adoption. The goal? Showcase its positive results by sharing the stories of moms who chose life. Believe it or not, some mothers actually think it's better for their unborn babies to abort them than to give them to families who want to adopt them. Marissa Cope's entire life shouts out, this just isn't true. Adoption can be a beautiful thing. Marissa can only express gratitude for the young mom and dad who created her.
My biological parents, I certainly hope, have the peace of mind of knowing that they chose life for me and they chose a beautiful life for me.
Marissa, oddly enough, grew up with a mom who looks almost exactly like her.
Our physical similarity is quite striking, and I look as much like my parents as my brother does, who is their biological child.
Now married to the towering J. Marty Cope, Marissa's just had her own baby. That experience has her reflecting on her own childhood that brings nothing but happy memories about being adopted.
It was presented to me from birth that this was a positive thing in a way that our family was built and grown. And so it's something that we've always celebrated. Good jokes through the years with my brother that, it took a little more to get me. I didn't come the easy way.
She sees it as a parallel to Christians' relationship with God.
We serve a God who loves adoption. He works through adoption. He adopts us in Christ.
In fact, Marissa and her family believe her first moment with them reflects how Jesus Christ sees all his people.
My brother was 6 years old when I was adopted, and the agency had a policy that the older sibling, if they were old enough, could actually be the one to carry out the baby on that day to present them to the family.
Marissa's new brother scooped her up in his arms with pride to present her to her new parents.
So he brings me out, and I had spiky hair going everywhere, and he says, "Isn't she pretty? Doesn't she look just like me?"
Marissa points out what that moment is like.
The love of Christ for us as he presents us to the Father and says, "Isn't she pretty? Doesn't she look just like me?"
Marissa uses that comparison as an encouragement for abortion opponents to step in and experience such moments for themselves.
A lot of times in critiques of pro-lifers, you hear it time and again, well, go out and adopt the babies if you care so much about them.
Marissa says she's felt so much love from both her own newborn and the young Ethiopian boy her brother adopted. So she speaks from experience when she promises parenthood will bring great blessing.
This is the most rewarding thing you've ever done in your life, and an adopted child, just like a biological child, is a gift.
But pro-lifers realize they're going against the grain in what's now a pro-abortion culture, where a place like Planned Parenthood aborts 145 babies for every one it helps get adopted. Marissa works at Heroic Media, whose mission is to convince women not to abort their babies.
Sometimes, in the mind of a woman, because of what she hears in our culture, abortion is a more humane choice than choosing adoption.
They've done in-depth research showing what women need to hear before they'll accept adoption, like how they can pick the family who will raise their child and get support during the months of pregnancy.
I'm pregnant, but I'm not in a position to care for this child. I want him to have a better future, to be with a family who'll love him and give him the things that I can't. I've learned that through adoption, I can choose the family who will raise him, and I can receive help through the rest of my pregnancy.
Surveys show these ads work. They aired over a 4-year period in Austin, and the number of abortions dropped.
The state of Texas reported over that same 4-year period a decrease in the abortion ratio by over 20%.
Marissa tells of one New York City woman set on abortion. She saw one of these pro-life ads featuring a number she could dial for help.
She called the number and she chose life and adoption for her child. So we've seen women who were pursuing abortion had the appointment and chose life and adoption instead.
2014 is the year of adoption, and organizations like Marissa's are begging women who are considering abortion to instead consider adoption. Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Paul. Great story. And up next, from the farm to your home, is there a new man's best friend on the market?
Well, we all know dogs are man's best friend, but another animal is becoming an increasingly popular pet across America: micro pigs.
Yeah, and due to their rise in popularity, Rhode Island has just issued its first license to have one of the miniature pigs as a pet. That license went to Victor Kinoyan. Not only does he have a micro pig, he also owns a store called My Pet Piggy. Kinoyan says having a pet micro pig can be similar to having other kinds of pets. Micro pigs have to be taken for walks, can be trained to use a litter box, and even learn to do tricks.
Micro pigs are extremely affectionate. They love you. They want your undivided attention all the time. It's tough to treat them like a dog or a cat because they're just so close to you. And so you got to teach them like a kid.
Cute. And even though they're called micro pigs, some experts caution the animal can actually grow to between 20 and 40 pounds.
So then I guess it'd be a macro pig.
Look kind of cute though, but
yeah. Could you see yourself owning one?
Just don't get hungry enough to make bacon though.
Yeah, that's true. That's pretty cruel. See you later.